Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. I was going to change up that opening, Matt Parker, but as limited as I am creatively, I couldn't think of anything else to say. But, ladies and gentlemen, Matt Parker, the recruiting guru for LettermenRow.com. Yeah, I've got you here for a reason again, Matt Parker. Welcome back to the Tim May Show.
It's always an honor and a privilege to be on the Tim May Show. Tim
Well,
May podcast, whatever you're calling it these days.
Yeah, I've never quite understood that phraseology, but we'll move on from there. You know why I've got you on, man. Bunch of reasons. Number one, there's a quarterback battle coming to a head on Saturday in Ohio Stadium. Cal McCord versus Devin Brown. Maybe a little Tristan Gebbia, sprinkled in there too. The transfer from Oregon State, seventh year, about to be a seventh-year collegian. But bottom line is there's a battle going on for the starting quarterback job to replace C.J. Stroud. But you know what? For recruiting fans especially, and that's why I've got you on, they're always looking for Christmas, man. Christmas is who's under the tree next. And suddenly, man, one of the great names, I think in my 40 years of covering Ohio State football, this guy has the potential to have the greatest name ever. Noland has committed to Ohio State, the left-handed quarterback out of Langston Hughes High School in Fairburn, Georgia. The same high school that produced Jelani Thurman, has committed to Ohio State to the 2024 class. That was big news over the weekend, and I think it's going to resonate for a while. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. After the quarterback circus with which Ohio State and Ryan Day and Corey Dennis and Brian Hartline and everyone else in the building at Ohio State has had to deal with in the 2024 cycle.
Yeah.
Flash forward about 4 or 5 months later, and they have once again found their guy, Tim. Kind of strung along. I don't want to say strung along they took their time, as they do with quarterbacks. This is now quarterback commit number 2 they've gotten in the class with the whole saga of Dylan Raiola. But we said before the show we weren't going to get into that.
No, you said that.
I'm not going to instigate it. I'm not going to.
You brought him up.
I'm not going to instigate that any further.
Yeah.
But this is a guy that, Ohio State, they've been talking to Noland since probably about late October, early November, seeing him almost like a byproduct of still recruiting Jelani Thurman, even though he had been committed to the 2023 Ohio State class. One of the things that you had said before the show was that, Noland plays in some of the most elite competition in the state of Georgia, Class 6A. That's some of the best high school football in the country.
But he didn't just play there. He excels there. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Threw for over 4,000 yards, 55 touchdowns, and only 4 interceptions. 4, Tim. That's video game numbers.
Yes.
Those are the kind of numbers that let's say quarterbacks like C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields, the late Dwayne Haskins have done at Ohio State. So you kind of see where that lines up, don't you, a little bit?
Yes. It's called a graph. They kind of line up the same way on the same graph. But what I like about him, too, is he's left-handed. Man, and when you watch his video, and I've watched quite a bit of his video, because I'm telling you, I grew up, everybody knows, I know, I've said it before, I grew up in Alabama and we moved to Texas in 1965. But Ken Stabler was one of my favorite quarterbacks ever at Alabama. He followed Joe Namath, who was followed by Steve Sloan, and then along came Ken Stabler, Kenny the Snake Stabler. But man, when left-handers just have a touch about them, and the way they throw the ball. And this young man, Noland, definitely has that touch. I mean, just can throw the ball softly in there, but he also can wind up and chunk it. And just when you watch his video, just his playmaking ability just jumps out at you. He's still a little bit lean, right? 6'2.5", 6'3", 185, 190. He can put on weight, but I keep reminding people he's not even a senior in high school yet. I don't know, as you watched him, as you've watched him, as you've heard other people talk about him, what stands out about him and his potential?
I think first and foremost, it's so easy to look at the on-field abilities, But you also have to take a look at some of those intangibles and those off the field things. This is a guy who, as a junior, took a team to a state championship game 15-0 and won the whole entire thing.
Yep.
He's going to be a 3-year varsity starter at Langston Hughes, which is no small feat. That's one of the rising programs in the state of Georgia. And his
Wait a
leadership.
minute, let me interrupt you. The fact that it won the state championship last year means that it has risen. Go ahead now.
Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
That's a pretty talented group of football players. Go ahead now.
Right. I'm not going to get into an argument of semantics.
Okay.
What I will say is that his leadership ability, his natural leadership ability at the quarterback position, which is something that every quarterback, if you're not a natural leader as a quarterback, chances are you're probably not the best quarterback. That's always been my opinion. People can disagree in the comments. Go right ahead. But he has that natural leadership ability. He's told multiple people, from national writers to guys on the Ohio State beat, that he announced his commitment on Saturday, but he had been recruiting guys to Ohio State since before he announced. That's exactly what you want out of the guy that is choosing you. And more importantly, Ohio State chose him. Yeah. So those are a couple of things that stand out. But, looking at what everyone else can see, it's his ability to get passes into windows, no matter how tight the window is, no matter how big it is. He puts the ball where he wants it to go, and it's going to go exactly where he wants it to go. And more times than not, where he wants it to go is also where it needs to go. That's exactly the kind of touch, and you kind of alluded to that or mentioned that earlier, just the touch and the precision that he has already as a rising senior. And then you imagine when he gets to campus, assuming as an early enrollee, when he gets to spend time in that quarterback room with Corey Dennis and, Ryan Day likes to frequently poke his head into that room as well. That the amount of coaching and just talent that is going to be around him, I'm excited. Like, it's hard not to be excited, even as a unbiased member of the media. You watch his tape and you're just like, oh wow, what can't he do?
Let me ask you this: you've got a Dylan Rail, considered the, at least back then, considered the number one quarterback prospect in the country, committed to Ohio State. He was recruiting for Ohio State, and then all of a sudden something went sour, and he stepped away from it. In December, that commitment, and how do you go about as a staff? How did this staff go about recovering and finding that quarterback for the 2024 class? Because like you just said, the list that Ohio State beat out for Aaron Noland is long and distinguished, including Alabama. Clemson was in on the running. Oregon, resurging Oregon was in on the chase. How did, number one, what went wrong in the recruitment of Dylan Raiola? And number two, how did Ohio State recover from that and get a fella with the caliber of Aaron Noland? Who, man, when you watch him on video, like I said, he stacks up with anybody I watched, including Dylan Raiola, just from the standpoint of leading his team to what you want him to get, which is first downs and touchdowns. Wow. Just a machine in some respects, the way he was clickety-clacking right on down the track. And but how does that happen? Number one, how did they lose Dylan Raiola? And for folks who haven't kept up with it. And number two, how did they get in on Aaron Noland and then finally close the deal? And by the way, the deal isn't closed until a young man signs a national letter of intent. Let's make sure people understand that. Go ahead.
Right. I'll believe all 9 of these prospects that are verbally committed will be at Ohio State when they sign their letter of intent on December 20 odd day. I don't know the date off the top of my head right now. But to answer your first question, everything about Ohio State is relationship driven. That's how they recruit. That's how they're going to recruit. Even in this NIL sphere, they will always relationship driven recruit prospects. And somewhere along the way, the relationship between Ohio State and Dylan Raiola just faltered. That happens sometimes when you're talking to 16, 17-year-old kids. They'll see something flashy somewhere else and be like, maybe I need to give that consideration. So to keep that first question and answer blunt, relationship and other opportunities elsewhere. Your second question on the essentially the how Ohio State and Aaron Noland got matched up, is that what you were getting at there?
Yeah, no, well, yeah, I would think they had him on a list. Let's put it that way. When you go to it's not a B list, it's the next guy on the list, like
Yeah.
when you're hiring head coaches, it's like you don't always get your first 2 or 3 guys, but then all of a sudden, Jim Tressel takes the job, and next thing you know, history is made. But go ahead.
Yeah, it's like it's like a depth chart. There's somewhere inside the confines of Woody Hayes Athletic Center, there's got to be some giant board that has every single prospect in order of who they want and so on and so forth. And Aaron Noland has been on that list ever since Ohio State started recruiting Jelani Thurman. And at some point, you're watching a guy that's catching the passes, right? Hitting the blocks, running the routes, but you can't help but to watch who's the guy throwing the ball. Who's this guy throwing the ball?
Yeah.
And like I mentioned earlier, it was in that late October, early November kind of time slot, putting the final touches on that Jelani Thurman recruitment when they're like, okay, we have a guy also in front of us that at that point in time, his recruitment really hadn't taken off yet. It wasn't until, probably around that December period, right around also early January. I remember being down in San Antonio, Texas for the All-American Bowl. And I had heard the name Aaron Noland before, and then a couple colleagues and coworkers at On3 had, we were having conversation talking about this quarterback, and then all of a sudden it's like he blew up into one of the biggest names that you had to know.
You know why? Because y'all's conversation was bugged. Now go ahead.
Well, it might have been, but certainly this is a guy that Ohio State has been watching for some time. And like I had mentioned, everything that they do is going to be relationship driven. And so they had to build up that relationship. Corey Dennis and Ryan Day and Brian Hartline. I think it's worth noting that now with Brian Hartline as the offensive coordinator, this is his quarterback.
Yeah.
This is someone that he envisions running his / Ryan Day's offense. So that's a very noteworthy thing that I think in some circles hasn't necessarily been discussed yet.
Agreed.
That Brian Hartline watched the tape and said, okay, this is someone that I want throwing to this 5-star wide receiver and that 5-star wide receiver and stuff like that. So that's also an important note in the Aaron Noland story for Ohio State.
Yeah. And dude, you talk about recruiting skill guys. I'm just calling them up, right? Mylan Graham, from New Haven, Indiana, the highest rated guy in his class right now, according to some services. I'm trying to remember where On3 has him. Just right on down the line. It's like, well, I'm looking at the wrong list here. But right on down the line, who's the other kid, the 5-star, Jeremiah Smith? I'm trying to remember.
Let me jog the memory here for some folks. They Ohio State right now has commitments from 2 5-star wide receivers. That'd be Jeremiah Smith and Mylan Graham.
Yeah,
those are 2 prospects that Jeremiah Smith, by every single major recruiting service, is the #1 wide receiver in America. No question about it. And if he had been in the 2023 class, he probably would have been the #1 wide receiver in that class too.
Wow.
He is a rising senior and is getting compared to Julio Jones and AJ Green. So take that for what it's worth. And Brian Hartline went down to South Florida and just plucked them up. So there's that. And then you have a guy, Mylan Graham, #3 wide receiver in the country by On3. He's the #12 overall prospect by On3, #1 player in the state of Indiana. And Ohio State, for what it's worth, has the #2 prospect in the state of Indiana, also committed to their class with offensive tackle Ian Moore out of New Palestine.
Yeah.
So Ohio State they've said it time and time again. This is a little bit of a tangent, but it's important to reiterate these things. Ohio State is making a newfound emphasis on 2 things: locking down the state of Ohio with the guys that they want, and then locking down Midwestern talent. And it's not like they're the only program in the Midwest. They compete with Michigan. They're going to be competing with Notre Dame for guys. Depends on how far you want to count the Midwest, but you'll have Nebraska in there if you want to count them in the Midwest. So there's a bevy of schools that are going to be going after the same talent, and the talent that Ohio State wants in Ohio and in the Midwest, they're getting. How that relates to five-star wide receiver Mylan Graham, was talking to Charles Power. He is the director of scouting and rankings for On3. As I like to call him, the star assigner. He is the one handing out the stars.
Constellation maker.
That, you know what? I just got a new name. That's a good one. I like that. I'm gonna keep that. He told me he watched Mylan Graham's tape, and he said that there are a lot of similarities in his game to former Alabama wide receiver, current Philadelphia Eagle Devonta Smith, who, if I'm not mistaken, the last wide receiver to win a Heisman Trophy. So that's significant. So you get a guy, you have two guys in your class, one of them who is compared to Julio Jones, and then the other one is compared to Devonta Smith.
How come, wait a minute, how come you can't compare him to like Chris Carter and Joey Galloway, two former Buckeyes? You know what I mean? Why does it have to be former Alabama guys?
Well, if you want, two things. One, it's the NFL that draws bigger audience, but then two, if you want Ohio State comparisons, I'll give it to you. Jeremiah Smith, Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah,
just bigger, already bigger.
Yeah, he's a big dude.
6'4", probably 200 pounds by now, 202, somewhere in that range. And then Mylan Graham, watching his tape, reminds me a lot of Chris Olave. A lot of Chris Olave.
Yeah.
So there are your Buckeye comparisons for you.
And to me, it's the Aaron Noland. And by the way, what a skill group. They've got James Peoples coming in, the one running back from Veterans Memorial High School north of San Antonio, Texas. Like you said, they start with a dot in Columbus. Ohio State does. That's the center, and then the diameter pretty much covers the United States in terms of if there's a blip on the screen. Number one, James Peoples is definitely a blip on the screen, and then number two, you do your homework on him and how much time his parents and lived in the Cleveland area. He's got connections here. So boom, the attractions. It's funny how recruiting works. You just keep tying strings together, and suddenly you got a rope. And that's the way it is with him. But the deal with Aaron Noland, it reminds me a lot of when they went out to watch a quarterback. I think it was Ryan Day went out to watch a quarterback in the San Diego area, and boom, who was that guy catching balls from him? It was Chris Olave, and boom, one of the great receivers in Ohio State history. Chris Olave was an afterthought for most people at that moment in recruiting. Suddenly Ohio State jumped on him, and he became a big-time recruit, but then he came to Ohio State, and we all know what he did. So it is funny how those connections, you're down there looking at Jelani Thurman, right? Or was it vice versa? Were they looking at Aaron Noland and saw Jelani Thurman? I'm trying to remember the genesis.
Not right there.
Yeah.
Not right there, but I like the idea.
Yeah. But Jelani Thurman and people who are paying attention to me on Twitter, stories, a couple stories I've written, the videos we've done post-practice with Spencer Holbrook and Andy Backstrom. I've been talking about Jelani Thurman since we got to first start watching spring this year. The young man that was a teammate of Aaron Noland this past fall help lead him to a state championship in Georgia. He's going to be, barring any injuries or dings, never know what happens in football practice. But the spring game is coming up on Saturday, actually more of a spring scrimmage in Ohio Stadium, and other people are going to get to watch a full bore with number 15, Jelani Thurman, 6'6", 255, 260 pounds, what he brings to the table. It's kind of exciting because this is a guy who was catching passes from Aaron Noland just 4 months ago, right?
Yeah, that's a guy that this spring game, I'm real excited to see what the entirety of that 2023 class that is already enrolled and at Ohio State, that is.
Yeah.
There's more than a few guys that are still yet to come, though a lot of them actually will be here in June. But of the guys that will be there and playing in the spring game this Saturday, Jelani Thurman's at the top of my list of guys that You know, that spring game, they try to make it as much of an actual game as they possibly can, and I am excited to see what he's going to do, because he's been, you and I have seen it along with Spencer and Andy, the spring availabilities that we get. He's pushing. He's pushing for time.
Oh, he's pushing for time. Hey, we're going to get into the couple of these other guys we're going to get to see who are, like you said, early enrollees. I'm not sure that's even the right term anymore. Actually, early graduates from high school, because almost half the class is, shows up for these things anymore. But we're going to get into that in a moment. But, obviously the prime attraction, the marquee attraction, if it was a boxing match, it would be Kyle McCord versus Devin Brown for the starting job, for the belt, that goes with the starting job, being the quarterback, number one quarterback at Ohio State. That's what's coming down. And with that said, I did a video with each of them several weeks ago, when spring football first started, and we're going to run those in just a second. But I kind of give a little insight in what these guys are thinking as it heads toward the spring game, because really, from a pecking order standpoint, Ryan Day has not given us a true pecking order. You got to figure Kyle McCord is 1A and Devin Brown is 1B, just because Kyle McCord's been the backup quarterback the previous 2 seasons to C.J. Stroud, and has actually started and won a game at Ohio State. But both of these guys have gone into this, and will go into the spring game on Saturday, like I said, barring any kind of injury, hell-bent on being the next number one quarterback at Ohio State and all that comes with that, which means, I think Kyle McCord's already listed on the Heisman odds, so everybody understands what's up for grab for these guys. You're getting to fly an elite level fighter plane in college football right now, from a passing attack standpoint and from an overall offense. So let's get to my conversations first with Kyle McCord and then Devin Brown, and then you and I will come back and we'll discuss what we're sort of looking forward to on Saturday when Ohio State stages this spring game. But first here, Kyle McCord, followed by Devin Brown.
Kyle, halftime of the Minnesota game 2 years ago, people were tweeting, etc., calling for Kyle McCord to go in place of C.J. Stroud. You understand what you're getting yourself into here? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think, it's a blessing and a curse. Obviously the fans want to win here, as they should. And I think, honestly, their expectation every year is undefeated national championship, and that's our expectation too. So, there's been a standard set here from, JT to Dwayne, Justin, CJ, and I think each one has just taken it and, risen it a little bit. So I think it's definitely one of the premier positions in all of sports right now, is to be the quarterback at The Ohio State.
As much as you wanted to play the last 2 years a lot, what has been the biggest benefit of getting to watch or stand and learn more than
I think, being able to see it from a different perspective, and then, getting in versus Akron and, some of the other games, I think, you can take what you've been learning while sitting, and then, apply it and, slowly develop and grow. But, I think just a combination of all those things have, done wonders, looking where I am now to when I first got here, a completely different player.
Hey, last question, but I always say that I'll probably have 4 more, but I promise last.
You're good.
What was it like to see you guys just push the ball down the field against Georgia? You were in on the game plan.
Yeah.
Obviously, as you pointed out a while ago, CJ ran more than ever, but it was because it was there, right?
Yeah.
If you could get past that first assault, et cetera. But what was it like to just see that offense really, those first 3 quarters, just really come to fruition?
Yeah, I think we were firing on all cylinders. I think we had a great game plan going to that game, and we had, I think, like a month to prepare. And I think we did a great job of that. And I think, you look back, and I think CJ played a phenomenal game, standing in the pocket and making a throw when he needed to. And then, when things broke down, escaping, and whether it was running or making a scrambled throw, keeping plays alive. So I just think a combination of all those things, and all the guys playing well up front, running backs, receivers, tight ends, everyone. So I think that was a total team effort.
And Coach Day has kind of indicated that's kind of the way he wants to play from now on. I mean, do you like that? I mean, considering the weapons you're going to have around.
Yeah. I mean, how could you not? I think, especially with the weapons, like you mentioned, unbelievable receiving core. I think a tight end core that, a lot of returning guys, running back room that's loaded, and I think a very talented O-line. So I think just a combination of those things is definitely an exciting mix.
Devin, as you approach this competition, I mean, do you feel the pressure? I mean, what are you feeling?
No, I mean, I'm just out here having fun. I'm playing the game I love and having the coolest opportunity ever to be one of the top quarterbacks in the country and compete for the best job in the country. Like, I can't ask for anything more. I'm just having a good time.
You don't even have to know what they said, really. I mean, they basically just talking about the challenge, and all the,
Probably
what they got.
the same garbage.
Yeah, what they got to
that
do.
Ohio State's been saying for the last 6 weeks.
But one thing Cal McCord touches on is how everybody thinks that there was an epiphany, and I kept pushing for this all season, but there was an epiphany in that game against Georgia. They threw the ball down the field. How many wide screens did you see in that game? Do you even remember one? You know what I mean?
Well, to be fair, I was a little incapacitated watching.
Well, first half though, you weren't worried, or were you already on the river walk, stumbling, falling into the water?
No, I wasn't in Texas yet. I was.
Okay.
I was in Cleveland with some friends, but no, the first half I was good. The second half, I started falling apart the same way Ohio State did.
I was going to say you could have fallen into Lake Erie. Might have never seen you again. But anyway, the main thing is Cal McCord talking about hopes that aggressive approach continues. But then we're going to get immediately into Carnell Tate and Noah Rogers. But Carnell Tate, you know what I mean. So here we go. Okay, Megan, we're coming back in 3, 2, and 1. Man, I always enjoy talking to both of those fellas. Both those guys have interesting personalities. Devin Brown, a little bit more over the top, maybe, but Cal McCord's a thinker. He really chooses his words wisely most of the time, and kind of like that, that gunslinger that sits in the back of the saloon in one of the westerns. You know what I mean? Until he's provoked. Meanwhile, Devin Brown's kind of out front. He's looking for a fight. You know what I mean? Type thing. So it's going to be interesting on Saturday to watch them. But Matt Parker. Cal McCord brought up a good point. Well, I brought it up for him, really, but he talked about just the aggressive approach Ohio State took against Georgia with its offense, when in fact I and others had kind of like questioned this side-to-side ad nauseum wide screen game they had shown really for a couple of seasons. And in that Michigan game, really, in my opinion, killed them to a certain extent. There were hardly any wide screens against Georgia. It was throwing the ball down the field to the best wide receiver in the country, Marvin Harrison Jr., and others, Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming. And it almost it almost worked. But the point is, there's a sense that Ohio State's going to stay aggressive in the offense. And I think that bodes well for the talent they've got on hand, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, if you have a Lamborghini, you're not going to drive it 10 miles an hour, and you shouldn't drive it 10 miles an hour.
Yeah, and stop at all the lookouts and check out all the scenery. That's not why you're driving the Lamborghini. Go ahead.
Right. You're there to push that engine all the way to the brink, and that's what Ohio State has. And like, I hate to say it, but it's like, why do you have to be in a semifinal game where no matter the result, as long as you don't get blown out, you're going to look good? I have long said, if I have any criticism of Ohio State, it's that they need to compete. They need to prepare for every single game like it is a semifinal, like it is a national championship. And you might say, they might, oh, we do, but like the proof is in the pudding, Tim. Like you can't tell me it's not. That was what we saw for 12 weeks versus what we saw on New Year's Eve against Georgia. Those were two totally different experiences.
Yeah.
And I think if Ohio State can, now granted, yeah, they did get a month to prepare, but at the same time, you can still be just as intense in your play calling and as aggressive in a week when you're preparing for Youngstown State, like they'll be doing, or, this season.
Indiana. Yeah.
Indiana to open up the season, right? I got Penguins on the brain for some reason.
Yeah, I do too, man. Go ahead.
I don't know what it is, but anyway,
it's the Jim Tressel retirement. But go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. my point in saying this is that I think that intensity and that aggression. That's kind of what got Ryan Day the head coaching job in the first place, don't you think? How aggressive he was as a play caller when Urban Meyer was still the head coach. And for some reason, the last couple of seasons, you saw maybe a step back from that, and then you get a performance like they had against Georgia in the Peach Bowl, a performance like they had against Clemson a few years back. That's the kind of thing that, what makes Ohio State, that
Yeah.
aggressiveness, that explosion, and that's what attracts recruits to Ohio State as well.
That's why I'm looking forward to the spring scrimmage on Saturday, because you know what? I think the scrimmages they've had so far have proven that Dallin Hayden is capable of running the ball, a bigger, stronger version of Dallin Hayden than you saw as a true freshman last year, thrown into the mix. Kind of got banged up, but man, he kept showing up, But now he's stronger. He looks even faster. And then Chip Trainum back full time at running back. They were missing what you'd call their quote top two end quote running backs through the spring. A lot of times through the spring, Travion Henderson sitting out the spring as he continues to recover from that foot problem that he got surgery for. He did show up in some workouts, but not in any big time hitting situations. And then Mine Williams was around, but they've been going easy with him too. But my point is, what bothered you about the Ohio State football team at the end of the year, well, throughout the season, was being able to stop big pass plays defensively. So I would expect with a quarterback, Donnybrook, coming up on Saturday, you would expect them to win it out, air it out, and that will bring to bear some other guys to keep an eye on from this 2023 recruiting class that you brought up earlier about Jelani Thurman being that early enrollee, but also Carnell Tate and Noah Rogers, for example, and Bryson Rogers. But the first two especially have had moments in the times we've gotten to watch practices, scrimmage situations, Carnell Tate especially. Wow. Yeah. When you consider that you're not going to see much of Marvin Harrison Jr. on Saturday. And then, of course, Emeka Egbuka and Julian Fleming have been held out of most of the big time stuff through the spring after having some touch ups physically in the off season. This is going to be a showcase situation possibly for Carnell Tate and Noah Rogers. I'm looking forward to that as much as anything. Aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. And you and I have talked about this at length in private conversations and elsewhere, but watching Carnell Tate at the All-American Bowl practices in San Antonio, I couldn't think of a better way to start my year than watching a guy that Brian Hartline had handpicked out of everyone in the country. He has every option he wants, and he handpicks them for a reason. And being down in San Antonio and watching Carnell Tate, that's exactly what everyone else has seen inside the Woody this spring. So, was I surprised at how quickly maybe he has progressed into the fold? And, he's, as a true freshman, he's probably going to be pushing for time in that loaded wide receiver room. I wouldn't be shocked if he gets in before garbage time. I wouldn't be shocked.
I want to tell you though, I mean, he made a pass, he made a catch on the sidelines. We all saw. Replay would have shown he was in bounds. But it was one of those toe tapper. I mean, this guy looks like in many instances, I know, everybody will blanch and go, you're gushing. I am gushing to a certain extent because some guys are worth gushing about.
How can you not?
He just so much looks the part of a receiver. It reminds me the first time I watched Marvin Harrison Jr. on the practice field at Ohio State, doing the same kind of things, the body awareness he has of where the sideline is, where his toes are, where his hands are. The most important part of a wide receiver, his hands. If he can't catch it, he's just a fast guy with nice awareness of his feet who can't catch, who won't play wide receiver. Maybe play cornerback. But just from the get-go, this guy jumped out at you. And, gushing to a certain extent, but those are the kind of things that are fun to watch in a spring game, a spring scrimmage. But what also is going to be fun to watch are going to be, in my opinion, what did I write? I called him down, the new Denzel Burke, compared to what we saw all last season when he was coming off, when he was dealing with injuries, he was playing with at cornerback. Just didn't look the same confident guy that he showed the year before as a freshman cornerback. And then, of course, Jordan Hancock suffered that hamstring pull just like Jackson Smith and Jigba did all hamstring pulls aren't equal, but he didn't come back until he felt 100% ready to come back. But he's looked really good in the spring. And then David Igbinosun, boy, that's a check mark on you hit a home run from a transfer portal standpoint. The young man who started 10 games at Ole Miss last year at cornerback, boy, he looks, long, lean, looks the part, can run, can jump. He's been, he's had a couple of big time plays in the scrimmages we've gotten to watch. And of course, Jair Brown, who started one game last year, but played, I think it was just one game, but played extensively. Man, their quarterback room looks so much different than it did, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. So you're going to have these battles going on, I think, in a quarterback race that's going to tell you a lot of things about how much this team has progressed in just the offseason and spring football, right?
And I think, well, absolutely. And I think on top of that, when you look at the defensive side of the ball, there's continuity for the first time in 5 years, is what it seems like. They're not learning a new defense again. They are relearning the same defense. They are expanding upon a defense that they learned last year, which is so big for your fundamentals, your confidence. You just rattled off 4 very talented cornerbacks, and that's a position where if you're not confident on the field, it's going to show, and you're going to get burned. You're going to get burned. And I think the fact that they have this continuity is so important for so many reasons. And on Saturday, I don't know how much, I don't know how much to expect in terms of what play callers offensively are going to do in terms of opening up the playbook and stuff like that. And here's a quick little interesting question for you.
Well, wait a minute. You don't have to look at the playbook too much just to throw the ball down the field.
No, I got a quick question for you because I'm curious about this and the storyline that has been progressing. So typically for the spring game, right? It's you have Team Scarlet, and they call them Team Gray, but they play in white jerseys, whatever. And on one side of the field, you're going to have Ryan Day, and on one side of the field, you're going to have Jim Knowles running the show over there. Do you think Ryan Day will call plays for one side and Brian Hartline will call plays for the other side?
I don't know. It'd be fun to watch.
I think that's something that I'm sitting here on the spot, just thinking about. That's pretty interesting.
Well, but you know what? You might want to try another guy like, quarterback coach Corey Dennis calling plays, although they probably want him talking to the quarterbacks, running back and forth across the field. If in fact they split them up that way, I prefer ones versus ones versus twos. You know what I mean? Sort of the best versus the best, or almost the best versus the best, as opposed to splitting up a squad. I'm sure they're probably going to do what I said, only because you get better video from that, or they call it film. You get better video from that, from the standpoint of who really had a good day against whom. But that would be fun to watch. But I keep telling everybody, play calling, you and I can almost call the plays. They'll have a list, of what they want to call, where they want to go for different situations. How that works, situational scrimmages. So we'll see where that goes. But that would be fun to see who calls the better plays. And of course, if you call the better play, it means your guys executed your play better than the other guys executed their play. So what was that? But it would be fun to watch. But what I'm watching is, I've said this all along, their primary mission in spring was to identify as close as they could a starting offensive line, replacing 3 guys on that offensive line. I think Josh Fryer looks like he's going to be the left tackle, but at right tackle, you've got Zen Mikulski versus Tegra Shabola. And at the scrimmage we got to watch the other day, Tegra Shabola got most of the action because Zen's been banged up. But then at center, you've got Carson Hinsman, Jacob James missing the spring. You've got Carson Hinsman coming along, but also another transfer portal guy, Victor Cutler, formerly from Louisiana Monroe, has made that a battle this spring. And you're you want to see those guys mixed in with other regulars and to see how that's shaping up, because that has so much to do with whether or not Cal McCord or Devin Brown has a great fall is what is the launching pad like? And so that's what I got my eye on. And man, I just throwing this out there. Like I told you about Jelani Thurman, you can't take your eyes off him when he's on the field. We know who their starting defensive ends are, JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer. But I'm telling you, Kenyatta Jackson has been at times unblockable. And whether that means they've got so much farther to go with their tackle situation than you think, or he is just like he has emerged. I mean, he's wearing 97. You know what I mean? Which means something. And then CJ Hicks has gotten a lot of time, especially lately with Tommy missing, for the most part, most of the spring as he recovers from his broken bones in both hands, and then now Steel Chambers in a boot and having a procedure done. You're going to see a lot of CJ Hicks on Saturday, barring injury. So those are young guys who are rising up. And who have you got is there somebody else you're kind of like interested in watching?
Yeah, two young members of the defensive back core. I'm really interested to see how Jermaine Matthews, the 2023 cornerback, does and his first action inside Ohio Stadium. You got to remember, of the freshmen that are there, the transfer portal guys that are there, this is the first time that they're playing inside Ohio Stadium. And even though it's a spring game, there's still probably going to be 40,000, 50,000 people there.
Maybe more. They put out a play.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't think it's going to be 105,000. It could be if they wanted it to be, but for reasons above my pay grade, I don't think Ohio State is going to let that happen. But anyway, these are two guys that are adjusting to college, being away from home for the first time, learning how to play college football because it's vastly different and much more difficult than high school football. So I'm very interested to see how cornerback Jermaine Matthews performs against those talented wide receivers that you and I had mentioned, and also safety Malik Hartford. That's a guy that lost his black stripe on Friday, I think it was.
Yes.
Lost his black stripe on Friday, so now he is quote unquote officially part of the Ohio State football team. To just see him progress. That's another guy that was down in San Antonio for the All-American Bowl who, after watching him, I'm like, I wouldn't want to get hit by that guy. And he's added 20 pounds of muscle since he's been at Ohio State. So that's impressive. But then also another name that I feel like so many people talk about, but it's almost like we want something to talk about this player, is Sonny Styles.
Yeah.
What is his role in this defense? And in a game-like situation, which Ohio State is going to create in this spring game on Saturday, what is safeties coach Perry Eliano and defensive coordinator Jim Knowles, what are they going to do? What position are they going to put Sonny in? Which of those safety spots are they going to want to see him in? They talked about that streamlined role. They don't want him to be a jack of all trades. They want him to be really, really, really good at like one or two things. Yeah. And I think that's the right place. So what that looks like on Saturday, I'm excited to see that too.
Yeah, I like him in that enforcer role because this guy, his dad, he's a bigger version of his dad, who was a linebacker at Ohio State, Lorenzo Styles, who's going to be on my podcast down the road, just talking about things, and having a son who's at Notre Dame and a son at Ohio State. That's pretty good, from a second generation. But the bottom line is, they got to figure out, but I'm telling you, this is gushing to a certain extent, but it's a privilege to cover a program like Ohio State as opposed to, some others in the country, because this is one of the elite programs. You can name on you can count on one hand what I think are the elite, but definitely Ohio State is one of them. And from a recruiting standpoint, the players we were talking about earlier, in the just the talent they're bringing in here, but I'll say this: there's no excuse for them not to have a great defense this year. Now, a great defense doesn't mean you shut out everybody. In this age, that's hard to do, no matter who you're playing. Right. Even if it's your beloved Youngstown State, that's hard to shut out a team. But just a ball hawking, get after it, make plays, takeaways, etc. This defense, from potential standpoint has that. And like you said, so many guys cut their teeth last year the hard way, especially in the secondary. There's really no excuse for a big step up defensively this year in the second year in the Jim Knowles defense, which, by the way, I think you're seeing sort of evolve in itself. You know what I mean? I mean, because it's becoming more and more obvious you don't necessarily need to use chicanery when you've got great talent at hand. Just turn the great talent loose. And
let me ask you something here. And this is just based off of your observations at practice and stuff, because I have a feeling that, you know, I haven't maybe showcased or maybe said yet, but when the times that we've been able to watch practice and things like that, have you just noticed a different attitude about that defense when they have the ones go out there? Have you noticed just maybe a little bit more of, you know, a snarl on their face, you know, a chip on their shoulder, all of those cliches that everyone likes to use?
Yeah. Well,
But
they should have. Yeah.
They take the field and against, you know, their teammates, against the offense, and like they want to go out there and they don't want them to gain a single yard. And obviously, this is my first spring covering Ohio State in any capacity, so I don't know what it's been like in years prior and stuff like that. But you know, the eyes don't lie, and I saw a defense last year that for the first maybe 8 weeks of the season, when the schedule was the schedule, I mean, you can't help who you play. I've heard a few people say that before, but there's now an attitude about this defense that I don't think we saw very much of last year.
Well, when you come out of like what happened to them in the fourth quarter against Georgia, and what happened to them throughout the middle part of the game against Michigan, when you gave up huge plays, which mattered, which cost you your dream of, number one, playing for a Big Ten championship, and then number two, playing for a national championship in succession. How can you not have anything but an attitude about yourself? You know, because you may speak of the silver bullets, etc. ethic, but when the bullets were flying, pardon that pun, you know, you came up short last year. Definitely. I mean, we could say a lot of things about circumstances about the offense not holding up its side of the bargain. Well, when you score 41 points, like the Ohio State did in that game against Georgia, you should win the game. And Ohio State couldn't handle Georgia in the fourth quarter, and Stetson Bennett. And just like Missouri had Georgia on the ropes and let them go in the fourth quarter. Same with Ohio State. So yes, that's job one. That was job one this spring, was to get that esprit de corps back, as I call it, or that swagger. But you have to earn swagger. You don't just say I've got swagger. You've got to go out and show it. And that's what this spring, a lot of this spring was all about. But it was also, as Jim Knowles said, getting guys in the right places to make plays. You know, not maybe they counted on a couple of guys last year from a talent standpoint who weren't, or talent standpoint might be capable, but from an awareness standpoint weren't in certain situations. And in the defensive secondary especially, you were exposed big time like no other place on the football field. So I think the progress I've seen in that secondary this spring is real, and it's great athletes running to the ball, making plays, and then guys rising like Sonny Styles, who you brought up. Somehow or another, he's got to get on the football field. I think everybody recognizes that. You know, we're not just like you see Jelani Thurman. That guy's got to play this fall somewhere. I mean, he's a matchup nightmare in the red zone, 6'6", and he catches the ball. You know what I mean? Whether his blocking comes along, that's what they're looking at. But they took his black stripe off at the end of the practice the other day. He and Carnell Tate have both lost their black stripes in the spring, before spring was over. That tells you what they think about him, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you can't ignore that. You can't ignore the fact that two weapons for Kyle McCord and or Devin Brown that are freshmen, true freshmen, with, in my opinion, probably zero intention on redshirting. Who knows? But
yeah, why would you redshirt a talent? You know what I mean? I mean, like that.
Absolutely.
Barring injury.
Absolutely. Yeah, that means a lot. That means something. And the black stripe is more than just, oh, you go out on the practice field and like you take care of your business. No, you watch those videos with CJ Barnett, who gets all excited, and he always mentions that guys are taking care of their business on and off the field, and that
Yeah.
stuff matters. Everything matters.
Yeah.
Brian Hartline gushing up Carnell Tate, saying he's a straight A student, one of the first guys in the building. And there are guys that have been in that building for 6-7 years that are having later arrival times than guys that have been on campus for 3 months.
Hey,
That's
some guys just want it more, man. I mean, even when you put elite guys together, there's the creme de la creme of the elite, and that's just the way it is. Well, hey, Matt Parker, I want to thank you once again for joining the Tim May Show again. And by the way, real quick before we sign off here, your crystal ball says those two linemen they got, twin brothers?
Yep.
That was big. And those guys look like they're hell bent to help recruit and brag about things. But your crystal ball says the next commitment to Ohio State will be from.
I think this spring game is going to be pretty nice.
That wasn't an answer. Go ahead.
I'm building to it.
Oh, okay.
You ought to know. You've been doing this long enough. You got to build to it. You can't just say, boom. Where's the fun in that? I got to hook the audience.
Right.
I'm thinking Saturday is going to be a twofer for Ohio State. I'm thinking the next commitment is going to be from a running back that I enjoy speaking with a lot. I think he's very talented, and I intend on watching him play this fall under the Friday Night Lights. Sam Williams-Dixon, originally from West Holmes, Ohio, played at Millersburg, but actually switched that around. But he has since transferred to Central Ohio Football Factory, Pickerington North. So he will be playing his senior season there. I think he is going to pull the trigger on his commitment, on his recruitment, choose the Buckeyes on Saturday. And I wouldn't be shocked if Ohio State adds another defensive commit, finally, to their class after having Garrett Stover, the younger cousin of Cade Stover. He's been the lone defensive commit. I wouldn't be too shocked if I don't want to name names actually on the defensive one. I'm going to keep that one close to the chest.
You had me right there on the edge of my rocking chair.
I know, but if folks stay tuned to lettermenrow.com, they will know who that name is.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know who this guy is. His name is Matt Parker, one of my favorite people just to shoot the bull with and occasionally have on the Tim May Show. Hey, by the way, Millersburg, in that area of the country, that's beautiful country. But I digress. And but hey, Matt Parker, thanks for coming on the Tim May Show again.
Thank you for having me, Tim May. I appreciate it.
And until next week, when we're wrapping up what happened for Ohio State in the spring game, did a quarterback really step up and take the job? Will we even know that after the spring game? Probably not. They want to keep both of these guys in tow. That's for sure, Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. But until next week, this is Tim May. We'll see you then.